If you're in the throes of dealing with addiction and you love someone, this podcast guest that I have for you today is fantastic. Rachel Graham is the founder and CEO of Healing Springs out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we've had her on before, and I just so wanted to have her back because she is an extraordinary human doing great work in the world, and she will change your life today. We're talking about an overarching framework that she has created called ARCH. And I encourage you to hang in there. You're about to change your world. And if you are someone who is loving someone dealing with substance use disorder, you're still in the shadows of shame and judgment and guilt. It's time for you to come out of those shadows. We've created a community for you. And I'm going to encourage you to go to voicesencourage.com/thrive, because that's what it's all about, is learning how to thrive. Welcome to our podcast once again. I am so thrilled to have Rachel Graham with us again. This will be the second time I've talked to her. And when we ended last time, I was like, I have to have her back, because we very briefly talked on a framework that she brought up called ARCH. And we're going to deep dive into that framework today for those of you who love people who are dealing with addiction. You need a framework of health, healing, and wholeness. And Rachel is one of the more brilliant ones at this, having walked that path. So I wanted to have Rachel back. And if you would, Rachel, just give us for those of you who didn't hear the first podcast, which was back in April, just a little bit of your story so that people can understand how you came to this space and why you're so passionate about it.
Sure. No, thanks, Kale. Thanks for having me again. I'm excited
Absolutely.
to kind of go through some of these models and techniques further. So thank you so much for this platform. And a little bit about my story. I went through I guess I got indoctrinated into the world of addiction through a loved one, my ex-husband, who struggled with addiction. I didn't really know anything about it when all of this happened. And so I kind of had to create my own recovery plan, if you will, as a family member in a support unit to a loved one that's struggling, and go through this process. And what I found in going through this process is that there's not really good, or at the time, there wasn't really good treatment out there. There was a lot of babysitting parlors, what I would categorize them as, but not a lot of work doing on really being done around root cause. So, addiction, as we talked about last time, is really the symptom. It's not the problem. It's often what gets you in trouble. And so until we kind of peel back the layers of the onion and look at the root cause, it makes it very difficult for someone to maintain long-term sobriety. So that's been my focus. I got into this industry, decided to build a treatment facility that does just that, that marries up the trauma, the mental health, and the addiction, and looks at how we can support not only the loved one that's in treatment, but then we also support the family system, or the team that's going to be the support team, going through that with them and helping them identify some pervasive patterns that they may want to look at, or family dynamics, generational trauma, those kinds of things, and give them tools and resources to be able to do that. So we believe that recovery is a family and a support system event. It's not just an individual event. And we all have our own journeys that we need to go through to heal. So that was the genesis of what is now Healing Springs Ranch. That's how I got there. And then I started speaking globally through my speaker platform, Evolve and Transform, to raise awareness to business leaders, political leaders, and spiritual leaders around the globe about what addiction is and what it's not. And really giving them the tools to not be condemning or to be judgmental about someone who's struggling, and to really level the playing field, saying that if you had been exposed to the same set of circumstances, it could likely be you. And so don't judge someone else's journey, whether it's the family member or the loved one. So that's been my passion, my purpose. I said something to my ex-husband, was trying to make amends with me one time. And I said, if you're doing this for you, great. But if you're doing it for me, you gave me the best possible gift another human being could give to one. And that's really helping me find purpose. I know exactly what I was put on this planet, and I live out that purpose every day. And, thanks by the grace of God to people like you helping me expand my reach to other people to try to help as many people as possible so that they don't have to experience really the struggles that we had while he was in treatment that, created some challenges for our family and some long-term residual issues for our family.
And that's definitely one of the connecting points for us is we both found our calling in this disease. That's for some people, that's like, what? And it's a higher level of consciousness and being willing to explore. I think we're both firm believers in when life feels like it's falling apart, it's actually falling together and it's leveling up. And in our worst moments is actually generally our calling is calling us.
Yep. It's interesting too. I find with people when they're going through hardship, they want to find ways to go to the right of it, to the left of it, over it, under it, instead of through it.
Yeah.
And the real meat, as you can attest from your own journey, is really the going through it part that reveals treasures. It reveals pain. It reveals, and you can live with pain and joy almost in the same space. You learn how you can understand those two as independent emotions, but that they can sit there in the same space. And so a lot of people want to hastily try to navigate, jump around something. And my thing is there's no other way to process this and to go through it, but look for the hidden treasures. And, we talk a lot about Joseph Campbell. So Godfather mythology. And I think I mentioned this before that, that go into the cave you fear most, for it holds the treasure you seek. So when you think about that, we should welcome adversity because, to your point, it's falling together. It's not falling apart. It feels like it's falling apart, but sometimes you got to shatter something to be able to put it back together, even in a better way.
Absolutely. Yes. And so, yes. So just speaking to that is most people are trying to avoid the pain. That's the sideways, up and down and over and all the things, all the machinations, all the craziness that kind of surrounds that avoidance of pain. And it's only through the pain that we become really, truly, authentically who we are. And we're human beings that feel. And so in so many ways, we try to mask our own humanity in the throes of this disease. So, yeah, so I so appreciate your perspective on this. And I want you to speak to the framework that emerged out of your journey that you call Arch.
Yeah. So I, kind of sitting around processing my own thoughts and of course, I've spent a lot of time doing my own therapy, doing all kinds of different things to heal myself. I started really this whole concept of Arch started percolating in my brain, and it's really a model or a way to think about change. And oftentimes we get into situations and we don't know what to do. And sometimes I say change a variable. Change any variable and let's see if you get a different outcome. So if you don't like the way you played basketball yesterday in the game, change a variable. Maybe you train a different way. Maybe you practice a different way. Maybe you change positions on the team, whatever it is, but change a variable. Don't keep doing the same thing you've been doing and expecting different results.
Right.
And so this model came up, and it's something I wrote about just really to help educate folks. And so I can show it on the screen if you'd like. I can throw it up there so everyone can see it.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay, so let me show you this. So this is really about the architectural aspects of change. So what's behind change? And so Arch is an acronym, as you can see here, and each letter stands for a specific thing that you must do when you're looking at change. And so the A stands for awareness, the R stands for root cause, the C stands for change, and the H stands for heal. So now that's kind of a high overarching aspect. But the reason I came up with an acronym with the term Arch, if you think about an arch, is often a bridge between two areas. And it's a supportive aspect. If you think about it, when we have arches and you think back to Colosseums and different things, those arches were supportive, but they were also meant to be pretty too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
designed, they're design elements. So
Mm-hmm.
the A is awareness. So the first thing you need to do.
So let me just say two things. One, and sorry to interrupt, but
No.
one is I want people to be clear as they're listening to this, that this is not for the addict. This is for the people who love people who are dealing with substance use disorder. So this is, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, so on and so forth. I want you to hear this. And then the other thing too that I thought of as you did that description, Rachel, was it's a bridge from what was to what can be.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that is awesome.
And it's really designed. It's beautiful, but it's designed as a support mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think too often we don't take time to really understand what's wrong. And to your point, yes, the family, this is great material for the family, because the family needs to understand that the family dynamics have to change. When you're in a relationship or involved with someone who's struggling with addiction, the whole family unit needs to take self-assessment and look at the things that we each can work on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so ARCH is really kind of a foundational piece for you to say, in order to make any change in your life, you have to first have an awareness about it. We can't change anything if we don't know it exists, Right. And you think about this even in your jobs that you might have had over your lifetime. If no one told you that you weren't doing something right, at work, you wouldn't know to change it, because you don't have awareness that, maybe your manager wasn't happy with the performance. So it's about having an awareness. Whether that awareness comes to you, it's delivered to you by someone sharing with you, or you have that internal self-awareness to determine, okay, I need to look at this. And I often use the rabbit hole as a really kind of a good visual. So if you think of the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, when you go in the rabbit hole, things kind of start spiraling out of control, right? And so we have an awareness when we're getting to the edge of that rabbit hole that we may be tipping into that or leaning into that rabbit hole. And the concept would be not to go down the rabbit hole, is to kind of address things before we fall into that rabbit hole and start into a intense spiral.
Yeah.
So once you have that awareness, that's like one of the biggest pieces of that is an awareness that there needs to be a change somewhere. So maybe in a family dynamic, there's an awareness that I am enabling my loved one by not holding them accountable for the behavior. That might be a good one that we see in family dynamics. So then we jump down to the R, which is root cause. Okay, so what's the root cause of this particular situation? So if little Johnny is struggling with substance use, okay, and we say little Johnny's, struggling with substance use, has overdosed multiple times, this, that, and the other. Okay, that's not the root cause. That's the symptom, like we said earlier. So starting to understand there's something driving little Johnny's behavior. And you've got to start peeling back the layers of the onion. And it may be something, and this is something parents say to me all the time. Well, little Johnny had a great lifetime and had a great childhood and all these different things. Well, parents, I would encourage you to know that things happen when you're not around. They happen at school. Trauma happens in the neighborhood. Trauma happens at friends' houses. Trauma happens with something they saw or witnessed that may not have been traumatic to you. Maybe you saw the same thing, but through the eyes of a 5-year-old, it was highly traumatic.
Right.
So there's a root cause there. And so it's starting to understand what that root cause is. And instead of being punitive about the action or the behavior, starting to sit down with and trying to understand, where's the pain? Where do you hurt? There's something there. Right.
And so for, like, as a mom, understanding that something is like the hungry ghost below the surface that was driving my son's behavior that I was completely unaware of. But for me as the mom, to be able to suspend my judgment around this and to be aware that there were moments when I was judging, or even in those moments for myself, when I would get a request for money and I hit Cash App send, my awareness hit me one day where I became aware that I was sending it because it made me feel better. And that's where the awareness led to, okay, what's the root cause of my stuff? And how do I unpack that so that I can very confidently and coolly say, no.
Right. Because this is really, when you go through it and break this down for the person of interest or the love, the loved one, the identified loved one, and then you take the same model and you put it on yourself, right?
Yes.
And so once you understand that there's a arch aspect for your loved one, and then there's one for you that may look different, and you really did a perfect segue into that, is really understanding your own awareness. And so like in our example with little Johnny, that maybe we are giving little Johnny money, and we know that deep down, little Johnny is probably not using it for the reasons he's saying he's using this money.
Right.
And we're giving him the money, right? And so then when we start looking at our own awareness, okay, I feel better because I don't want to make little Johnny upset. If I make little Johnny upset, he might go use and overdose and die, and then I'll live with the guilt of what's happened. That's a big thing, especially for parents of children that are struggling, is you end up starting to parent from a place of fear.
Yes.
Rather than structure, which is exactly what they need. They need structure.
Oh, can you just say that one more time, Rachel? That is just so, I think, profound for parents to hear.
Kids need structure. And this is something I tell the parents, that you're not here to be their best friend. You're here to be the parent, and your job is to raise high functioning and high contributing adults.
Yes. And to stop parenting from fear.
Yep. And when you parent from a place of fear, I guarantee you that you're only going to perpetuate the things that this individual is going through, your child. And I think I want to stick with this for the purpose of this discussion, if that's okay, the parent-child relationship.
Yeah,
because
it's great.
I think it's something you know something about, but also I think it's very common because everybody that struggles is the child of somebody. And so looking at it from that piece of it. But I think as we kind of go through the model, so we have the awareness, the root cause, and then once you have awareness and you can identify the root cause, then can you set out to change and changing the variable, changing something about the dynamic, which then ultimately leads to healing. And healing, people think if you heal, everything's going to be okay. No, think about it. I mean, all of us have scars on our legs and arms when you fell off the bike when you were a kid, and you still have them even at our age now. You can tell the story of them. You're going to have scars, but you want the scars to heal and not be open wounds. And too often we let them stay in an open wound state, and we keep doing things to agitate the wound, and so it can't heal. So as the family member goes through this, it's important to understand the loved one's perspective on this. And as the family member goes through, is sitting there asking yourself, okay, so I'm giving little Johnny money. So I have an awareness, I'm giving little Johnny money, and that's probably not smart because little Johnny is probably using it to do other things versus what he's telling me. Right. And so now what's the root cause? Well, we need to sit down with little Johnny and figure out what's going on. Because at the core of addiction is self-esteem issues. It's shame. It's I tell people there's a difference between shame and guilt. People sometimes get those two confused. Guilt is if I hurt your feelings, KL, on this podcast, and I call you later on, I say, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings. I want to apologize. I won't do it again, whatever it may be. And then we work through it. Shame is different. Shame's much darker. And it's a real feeling of self-loathing, as if there's not a space on this planet for you. And that shame is at the root of addiction. When you have such a low self-esteem, are consumed with shame, have childhood trauma of some sort, those things, when you put them all together, are the perfect recipe for addiction.
Yes. And on the family side or the friend side, I can't even begin to tell you how many people I know that it has been 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years before they told me what was going on in their families because of the shame they held around it.
Yep. And if you go walk out your front door and look around your neighborhood, there is something heavy going on behind every door. Everybody's got their stuff. And to your point, I think a lot of people that are consumed with the shame or embarrassment of what's happening in their family won't share. And honestly, the way we all heal together is by being open about this, sharing these things so people know they're not alone. People, can learn from other people's journeys on what worked, what didn't work. what I found in all of this, because my whole speaker platform started because of shame around what was happening. When my ex-husband went to treatment, there was a lot of gossip in our community about where he was, why he was there. And all of a sudden, my kids weren't allowed to go to certain people's houses, and their friends couldn't come to our house. And I couldn't figure out what's happening.
Wow.
And one of the neighbors ended up sharing with me what people were saying. And, I was ashamed of what had happened. I was embarrassed. And then that's what kind of fueled me to say, you know what, the best way I can combat that is to educate people with what I'm learning, because I didn't know it either,
Yeah. That's why you and I are like connected so powerfully. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it takes a stronger person to get up and talk about, in our last conversation, when I tell you about what I learned about myself, that I was not emotionally available, that's not the most favorable thing that I could say about myself, but it's true, and understanding what that looks like. And so, I think until we're all willing to do these things, and I think oftentimes when we're parenting someone that's struggling, there's some generational pieces of this too. So when you as a family member start looking at, why do I keep giving my kid money when I know they're buying drugs with it? And, I don't want to give them the money to overdose. I know that's bad, but I don't want to make them mad either, because when they're mad, they get pretty abusive, or whatever it may be, start yelling and whatnot. Then you have to look at your own pervasive patterns in your own family line on why you're doing that. Maybe it's because you didn't feel supported by your parents, so you're going to over support your child. It could be all kinds of different things, but there's often generational aspects, because we learn those things. It's not that anyone's doing anything wrong. We're the product of the environment we grew up in and what we learned. And maybe, in some families, if you hurt yourself, your mom and dad bought you something to make you feel better. I mean, think about how many times, I can think of when kids were crying or whatever, let me get you a cookie.
Yeah.
That's probably not the best solution to helping your child to stop crying. The best solution is sit down and help them and sit with them through that sadness. Tell me what's bothering you. How can you resolve it? And giving them back the power. The next thing I see too is and I'll say, I'll take, and maybe I'm going to get slammed for this, but Gen X, the Gen X, I really feel like in some ways and boomers too, boomers and Gen X, we've done some things because we want our kids to have a better life than what we may have had. And we've overcompensated for some things. And so what's happened is we've not helped them build their emotional muscle around disappointment, frustration, anger, sadness, joy, even. And so it's something, I think the intention was good.
Yeah.
We didn't want them to be latchkey kids. So we, figured out a way to make that happen. We didn't want them to not have the appropriate clothes to go to church on Sunday. We didn't want all these things. So we did things to make their world safer. And so what's happened is we have a generation coming up that doesn't understand their emotions. And how would they? How would they? So, oftentimes our answer as a parent is not to fix their problem. It's to help them fix it. And to help them fix it means sitting with them and coaching. And I think that's something, when I was raising my kids, there's a time that you're a parent, you hover over your kids and you make sure they don't bonk their head or eat something they're not supposed to, or touch a hot stove or whatever it is. But then as they grow, you've got to pull back, and your role shifts from being a parent monitoring their safety to being a coach, helping them and not telling what to do, not sticking your own judgment on them. And that shift is hard. You think about the first time your kids get keys to a car and they drive off in the car. And I mean, as a parent, you're like, oh, but you got to hope that you've done everything you can to coach them on how to handle traffic, how to handle the car, and all those things. So that's something I see too, that we're parenting 25-year-olds,
Yes. Well, somewhere in the mix of all of this, the mommy handbook, the code has been, we need to fix it for them, and we need to keep them safe, and we don't want them to suffer. And it's, and so really getting clear about what your handbook is, and then changing the handbook, because we're all going to suffer. And it is the suffering that makes us more human and more empathic and more compassionate with others. And it's not our job to fix it. It's our job, like you said, to walk with them while they figure it out.
Yep. Yep. And I love that, the mommy code, because when they're young, we're trying to teach them things. And when they're, teenagers and above, the best thing we can give them is a good head on their shoulders and healthy self-esteem. And the way to give children healthy self-esteem is by letting them solve their own problems. Your kid gets themselves into credit card debt, don't bail them out. Help them figure out how to dig themselves out. But first they need to understand, how did I get there?
Right.
What was I doing that, allowed this to happen? Okay, now I got to dig myself out. Your kid makes a bad grade. Don't go advocate with the teacher and tell the teacher that they gave your kid the wrong grade.
Right.
Yeah. Teach your kid to advocate for themselves, because each time they advocate, whether they get a positive response or a not so positive response, they're building self-esteem. And that self-esteem is critical to being a high functioning adult. That doesn't mean that you're overconfident, because we all have insecurities. We all have things. But having enough wherewithal to say, I have the tools to be able to advocate for myself in a productive way, not in a demanding, entitled way, in a productive way that many times I'll have a favorable outcome because of that. But if I don't, then maybe I need to think about it differently, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I'm thinking about is, I grew up in a really super dysfunctional household. My dad was the enabler. My mom was addicted to prescription medications. My brother became addicted to cocaine. And I remember at some point in my early teens thinking, this is messed up. And I need some skills here to learn how to be a functioning adult. And a happy human. And so that really has been my life's work. And all these junctures along the way, like with my ex-husband and my son and so on and so forth, they've all been opportunities for me to continue to skill up. And so as you talk about this, there are a lot of people walking around like me and like a bunch of others that didn't get this training when we were growing up. We had to find it. We had to search for it. We had to do the research. We had to do the trial and error. Oh, that's not what I wanted to create. Oh, that is what I want to create. And so I think it's just the journey of being an awake, alive, and human that really wants to continue to evolve.
Yeah. And they didn't teach this stuff in school. I mean, none of us had an emotional university 101 class.
Right.
Right. And the reality is, you said something really, really poignant, which is very common. And unless you come from a super emotionally sound, functional family, which is rare, by the way,
yes,
you don't get these tools, and they can show up in life choices. We often see children of narcissistic parents. It's not uncommon for them to then seek out narcissistic partners because it's familiar to them. And they're frustrated and they don't know why they're doing that, but it's because it's the familiarity to them. And so we will repeat certain things. That's one thing that happens sometimes with families. And in a family with the dynamics like you described, it's not uncommon. I don't know if you ever felt like this, but I see this with other children where there's one child that feels like they need to carry the torch of being the good kid because the other kid's making mistakes, this parent's making mistakes, everybody's making, so I have to be good just to stay out of the line of fire, right? And
absolutely.
So yes, we call this the lost child. So they minimize their needs. They do whatever it takes to fly below the radar. And in doing so, they learn in a way that marginalizes their wants and needs in life. And only until they learn that they're doing that can they address that and learn to advocate for self, that they are deserving of the things that they want and need in life. Again, healthy, speaking in a healthy way.
Right.
And so that lost child often struggles, even though they were the kid that made the good grades and didn't get in trouble and did everything that they were supposed to be doing. They struggle later in life.
Yes, that would be my story. I somebody needed to be the adult in the room when I was growing up, and I was the oldest. And so therefore, I took on the mantra, and it wasn't, till years later that I realized, oh, that's what I did. Okay, now we have to, I wanted to retrain myself in so many ways to get to, I guess, a healthy whole place. And it's still a work in progress. It doesn't like disappear. And, to your point, is it's awareness and it's understanding and it's change and then it's healing.
Yep. And I think, for me, and thank you for sharing kind of your perspective. For me, I became the rescuer. My mother, struggled with my parents' divorce, and just like you said, there need to be an adult in the room. And I stepped up. And what happened is I lost, quite a bit of my childhood and had to be a mature adult at a young age. And so I learned some skills, and I learned that I can take care of people. I can do things. And so then you start getting into a rescuer dynamic, which is an unhealthy dynamic, to where now I'm rescuing you and I'm not teaching you how to rescue yourself.
Right.
So these patterns creep up. So you think that you get out of these family situations, but they creep up, different song and verse.
Yes. And that's why it's important for us to recognize that we have an equal amount of work to do too. And the disease is the gift that both of us recognize as an opportunity to do our work.
Yep. And you can't control anyone else but yourself. So I can't love my child enough or give them enough money or do any of these things for them to love them out of addiction. They have to want to do that journey on their own. I can walk alongside them, but they're going to have to do the work. But I certainly can change myself and the way I'm showing up and the way that I, look at my wounds, my childhood wounds, that I heal those so that, I can be a better person or a more fulfilled person, whatever it may be that you're looking for. But I think too often we think if we just do this, we can fix the person struggling with the addictive patterns. You can't fix them. They have to fix themselves.
Right. They have to get to a point where they choose life.
And there are some people that don't. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation that they would rather stay in these patterns versus doing the work, the painful. It's hard work to work through those things. And it's a struggle for many parents to watch, to be honest with you. And then there are some that, all they need is an opportunity to learn and grow, and they embrace it and seize it and move forward. And so my hope is that we can inspire people that are struggling, that there is peace on the, peace out there through healing. And if you can look at this model and have an awareness about what's going on, identify the root cause, look at what changes you need to make, then you can heal. If we can inspire some of these folks to see that, we won't have people overdosing. I don't know how it is for you out there, but we have, a big fentanyl issue in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's horrible. And what people don't know is it takes just a grain of salt to kill you.
Right.
And this stuff is it's out there on the street. It's cheap. It's, something too that you don't even know in today's day and age. If you're buying marijuana, oftentimes it can be cut on the same scale that the fentanyl is, and it ends up laced. So there's so many dangerous things out there that if we can help someone get to these issues, then they don't need to self-soothe with fentanyl is just one of many things, obviously. And that's substance use. We have process addictions too. So, you look at your kids with video gaming, you look at social media, you look at gambling, you look at over pleasing or overachievement at a level that's unhealthy,
Yeah. I mean, culturally, we have created busyness as a badge of honor, and workaholism, shopaholism, all these things that are keeping us from connecting with our spirit, our soul, our fullness in life.
You're exactly right. And distraction, busy, being distracted, workaholism, that's a process addiction. And it's one of the most dangerous ones, I think, in many ways, because you seek praise at work. And when you're getting that praise, you just keep doing more and more of it. So, and there's something that I would say, I don't know if I shared this with you. I can't remember if I shared this with you before, But this is kind of a little personal story that I wanted to maybe help your audience connect a couple of dots. So when it was several years ago, it's been a while now, but I had my kids help me pull. I have a shoe collection that would rival Imelda Marcos's. And for those of you that know who she is,
That's a statement.
yeah. So my kids helped me pull shoes out from all over the house. I had them tucked in all kinds of places. We laid them out in the playroom, and I think I counted 750 pairs of shoes, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Wow.
And I looked at it with the shame, kind of embarrassment of, why do I have so many shoes? And I could not connect what my infatuation is with shoes, because some of them are even worn. And so as I sat there and sat with it, trying to understand it, and I started tracing back, following the arch patterns, I have an awareness that I have way too many pairs of shoes, that I can't even house them in my closet, So then now what's the root cause? So I walked back through the root cause, and all of a sudden I connected the dots when I really got still and silent and asked myself, what joy do these shoes bring me, even when I don't wear them or they hurt my feet? And I remember a time when I was about 11 years old, and my sister and I had my parents were in the midst of a divorce. My mom was sharing money with a boyfriend at the expense of our household. And so we had this nice dress for Easter Sunday, and we had these ratty shoes, and I was embarrassed about the shoes. And so my mother had stored some cash in an area in the house. I found the cash, and I took the cash, and I went and bought myself and my sister a pair of shoes. And I turned to her, and I remember saying, I will never be without the right pair of shoes.
Wow.
And so if you think about that, I identified, it was a self-esteem moment. I identified embarrassment with the wrong shoes. I mean, this is a young girl. So when I fast forward, I connected root cause. Okay, I need to change something. So the change was, I needed to tell the 11-year-old inner child, you're okay. You are not your shoes. You're not defined by your shoes. You have plenty of shoes, and a lot of these shoes need to be given away to people that need shoes. So I started giving them away. I still have, a number of shoes, but nowhere near what I had, and slowly got rid of them. But it wasn't until I connected the dots to the root cause was feeling less than, self-esteem issues, because I was embarrassed about the shoes, and I was never going to find myself in that space again.
Right. And so what I love about that was you got quiet. So you could hear the story of your past.
It's in there if you get still, and that's the only way. And when you just mentioned about being busy, we oftentimes get very busy to drown out the stuff that's trying to percolate to the top.
Exactly. And in enough cases, we're not even aware that that's what we're doing. It's unconscious behavior that we've grown up in and we've been praised for, and therefore we just keep doing it until something does happen. That is the opportunity for us to kind of wake up and realize what's really truly going on.
Exactly. So there's beauty in the silence, and there's beauty in the discomfort. That wasn't a comfortable thing to think back to that little girl who stole money. I knew that was wrong, to steal the money from my mom and then go buy the shoes. I couldn't believe I finally figured out what the origin was to my shoe collection.
Yeah. And we each have so many stories like this if we'll just take the time to create quiet for ourselves and to actually explore. And all of this is rooted in our childhoods. And so, we're kids. We have this much of an experience in life versus this much or more as an adult. And so it gives us an opportunity to revisit and reparent ourselves and love ourselves and make it different.
Yeah. I tell young 20-somethings this, when they talk about my parents did this, they didn't do that, whatever. And I say, okay, you're an adult now. When you were a child, you were dependent on that family system. You're an adult. It's your job and your responsibility to nurture yourself, to figure out what it is you want to take with you or not take with you, to heal and to follow that arch piece of that. If your awareness is that these things happened, okay, well, what was the root cause? And then start making these changes so you can heal. People do the best that they can at the time with the tools and resources they had available. So all of us have stuff from our childhood. We can say, my mom didn't do this, my teachers didn't do that, or my dad didn't do that, whatever it is. And the reality of it is those things are what made you who you are today, good and bad. And it's your job as an adult to figure out the life you want and the destiny you want to manifest and go for it, you know, and stop blaming everybody else for your hurts, your pains, and your hardship. Heal yourself, because oftentimes, especially when we see clients that have been through really traumatic assaults and things like that, they can't confront the person, or maybe the person's not even alive anymore. You can still heal yourself. You don't necessarily have to talk to your perpetrator or get answers around why. You can still heal yourself absent that information. And it's your responsibility to do that. You'll keep making the same mistakes. And guess what? You hand it to the next generation.
Right. Wow. That's a deep well right there, is the really traumatic, horrific things that have happened to us in our past, that we don't need those people in order to do the healing work. You know, I recently did a little bit of energy work with a woman in our community, because what was bubbling up for me was my brother tried to kill me a couple of times when I was growing up. Now, he had I understand what was going on in his life now as an adult and all of the things. So I don't harbor anything about that, but was kind of hanging on to the betrayal and the shock of those two incidences in particular. I don't care who you are. If you're human, you've got stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
And safety is an important core thing that we as children need. We need, you know, air, we need food, water, safety, and shelter.
Yes.
You know, and then wrapped in love, you know, love and support. And so to have a safety feeling or compromised safety feeling with your brother, which is someone who traditionally you would look to for that safety and protection, is hard, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And so what I had said was, I don't care who you are as a human, you all have stuff that happens to you as a child. In our adulthood, we get the opportunity, and it shows up in all these different wonky ways. But certainly, I believe addiction is showing up in a big way to get our attention so we can do the work that we need to do to heal ourselves.
And let it be a beacon and a call for the family to say, what do we need to do as a family system alongside you and walk the journey with you, identified loved one? What do we need to do? Because we know it's an us issue. It's not just a you issue.
Oh, say that again.
It's an us issue and not just a you issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. So those of you who are listening to this, I think that's a great little exclamation point on our time together. And I really, both of us really truly encourage you to lean into this framework of ARCH, create some space and silence for yourself so that that still silent voice can emerge and your truth of what your root cause is can begin to percolate up. So, Rachel, how can people get a hold of you? Because I'm sure people will want to reach out in some form or fashion.
Thank you. Yes. So you can find me at healingspringsranch.com or evolveandtransform.me. I've got lots of material out there. If people want to go swimming deeper, I've got on Healing Springs a lot of material from some of my colleagues as well. So I encourage you, and you can reach out to me through there, and I'm happy to help, happy to sit down and talk with anyone that's, you know, needing some assistance or guidance or just a listening ear. It's part of my purpose and part of my journey. So I'm happy to help. And Kale, I can't thank you enough for the hard work you're doing to really support the families, because we became the lost children once upon a time with this whole world of addiction. And it's not until families members like you step up and share your story and create a platform and take charge to try to share that are people going to heal and family systems going to heal. So thank you so much for the hard work you do. I greatly appreciate you giving me an opportunity to be on your show again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been just a beacon of light, and we share so many commonalities in how we've approached this. And we've both made our, calling out of it. So again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're an awesome, awesome person.
Thank you. As are you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Rachel Graham for being on the podcast today. She is an extraordinary human. I am blessed to call a friend. And going over ARCH, awareness, root cause, change, and healing has actually made a profound impact in my own life. We share some very intimate stories, her journeys and my journeys, in how we have navigated this framework called ARCH. I love the ARCH symbolism because it's about going from who you used to be. It's an arch to the possibilities of who you're becoming. And if you're someone who's still dealing with the isolation and the aloneness of this disease as a loved one, still living in shame, guilt, judgment, it's time for you to come out of the shadows. It's time for you to join a community that will have your back and is safe psychologically for you. So please go to voicesencourage.com/thrive. Join us today.